The beam of flashlight disappeared into the darkness before it ever reached the end of the tunnel. There was water somewhere dripping slowly through the rock. A nervous laughter followed. Being so far underground, you can feel almost everything, especially when you're in a narrow tunnel where the air feels heavy. For more than a century, this island's mines were the heart of the community, but they were also places of death and danger. You take out your camera to take a picture of the family, a memento to look back on before you head back up. You've had enough. In the comfort of the surface, you look at what you've taken. And suddenly, the history of this place didn't feel like history anymore.
And they'd be looking through their pictures on their screen, and they'd see something in the picture. So they'd be taking a picture of their family member, and it would look like a shape or a glow or something behind their family member.
I'm Nadine Bailey, and this is Haunted Canada. Today, we're headed to a place where people spent their lives, where they worked, where they suffered, and where some of them died. I'm joined by Teddy McCarthy because, according to some, this place may not be as empty as it looks. This is Bell Island, the mind that never sleeps. This story begins long before the mines were ever carved out here. Bell Island, as it's known, sits in Conception Bay, off the northeast coast of Newfoundland. This area was home to Indigenous peoples for thousands of years, including the Beothuk, whose history in Newfoundland stretches back long before European settlement. Indigenous peoples used the island and surrounding waters as part of a much older landscape of travel, fishing, hunting, and seasonal activity. Researchers believed they had several hunts for migrating seals, which would have brought them past and possibly onto Bell Island itself, even though the island's steep cliffs and thin soil would have made it difficult for a permanent settlement. European settlement eventually took hold around Conception Bay, and Bell Island became increasingly connected to the surrounding fishing communities because it was close enough to St. John's that on a clear day you could see the mainland. However, it's far enough away that the only way on or off the island still to this day is on a ferry that can take about 20 minutes, or considerably longer depending on the ice, wind, and fog. But it would be worth it eventually, because beneath the island was something that would dramatically reshape its future: iron ore. As early as 1578, it was known that the island contained iron ore. The English merchant Anthony Parkhurst had discovered it, but despite the early knowledge, the information was ultimately not used. The heavy rocks of Bell Island were historically mined on a limited scale for ships, but not on a larger scale. In 1892, the Butler and Miller families of Topsail obtained a mining license for the iron ore on the island, which at the time was first identified as hematite. Teddy McCarthy is executive director of the Bell Island Mine No. 2 Tour and Museum. She grew up on the island, raised her family there, and she has spent 30 years sharing its history. She said the New Glasgow Coal, Iron and Railway Company, known as the Scotia Company, leased their rights.
In 1895, surface mining began on Bell Island. They came in 1895. They saw that there was ore on Bell Island. They assayed the land. They bought it. They bought it from the Butler family, actually. Then, once it started to be surface mined, the mining company realized that, oh my heavens, hang on now. This goes a bit deeper than this. Oh, hang on now. It's a bit deeper still. Oh, wait a minute. So then it went from like surface mine to underground mine.
The first iron ore was taken from an open pit on the northwest side of the island. Then, miners discovered that the iron wasn't simply sitting on the surface. It continued down. Eventually, the mining operation would follow the ore beneath Conception Bay itself. The location was ideal because the ore could be loaded onto ships immediately, and in addition, it was close to North American and European markets. On December 24, 1895, the first fully loaded ship departed for Nova Scotia, and less than a year later, the first ship departed for the United States, while the first transatlantic shipload departed for the port of Rotterdam on November 22, 1897.
So my father was a miner for 42 years. He was called a nipper. He was a nipper. He had grade 2 education. He started when he was 8. So his mother died when he was 6, and his father needed help to raise the children, so they had to bring somebody in. And in order to do that, my father went to work.
In the beginning, miners worked enormous open pits. Trees and roughly 9 meters of overlying material were removed to expose the iron-bearing layer underneath. The ore was then broken out of the rock, initially with relatively simple tools, and the valuable pieces were separated by hand. This was known as cobbing, but the surface deposits wouldn't last forever. By around 1903, much of the easily accessible ore had been exhausted, and instead of abandoning the deposit, the mining companies followed the iron downward. For that, miners dug out the ore underground, using a candle on their hard hats for light. Eventually, they turned to carbide lamps, then to electric lamps. And then the miners discovered something extraordinary. The iron didn't stop at the shoreline. The ore beds continued beneath Conception Bay. Beginning in 1905, the company started developing what became the submarine mines. Eventually, miners were working miles beneath the ocean floor, extracting iron from tunnels hidden underneath hundreds of feet of rock and seabed.
Well, it went out from 3 to 5 kilometers out under the ocean floor towards Carbonair, Harbour Grace, that area. So yes, my dear, we have had an incredible mining history.
Think about that for a moment. There was an ocean above them, and underneath it, men were drilling, blasting, loading, and hauling iron ore. The further the mines expanded, the more complicated the operation became. Ore had to be broken underground, loaded into carts, hauled through the workings, and brought back towards the surface. Ventilation, drainage, transportation, and ground stability became constant concerns. And there was no margin for error. By the time Teddy's father was old enough to work underground, Belle Island had grown into something closer to a small nation than a mining camp. The island, which measures 9.7 kilometers or 6 miles long and 3.5 kilometers or 2 miles wide, had all the amenities anyone needed, including 3 movie theaters, a bowling alley, a curling club, 13 schools, 7 churches, a hockey arena, and a tennis court. Everything Teddy says, except a liquor store.
If you wanted to buy a bottle, you had to get on the boat and go to town and go to Water Street to buy your bottle for Christmas. And if somebody walked into a liquor store on Water Street with a $50 bill, dollars to donuts, the sales clerk said, "You got a $50 bill. You must be from Belle Island." And that's a true story, because the Belle Island people, not that they were overly wealthy, like my father brought home $50.25 a week. That wasn't a lot of money. When they retired him out of the mine after 42 years, his pension, Nadine, was $40.20 a month.
Make no mistake, it was a tough life, characterized by horse-drawn ore carts, unsafe conditions, and tragic fatalities. Making matters worse, 2 world wars loomed on the horizon.
We shipped millions of tons of ore to Europe, and we helped build the German war machine. We did. We sent iron ore to Germany, and from the iron ore they made steel, and from the steel, you know what they made, and to Great Britain and to France and to all over the place. But at the end of the day, that's the reason why we saw enemy action in 1942.
By the summer of 1942, the war in Europe had been raging for almost 3 years. But on Belle Island, thousands of kilometers from the battlefields of Europe, the work continued as ore was shipped to steel mills to help produce ships, weapons, vehicles, and equipment. And the Germans knew it, so the remote mining community became a target. German U-boats had been prowling the waters around Newfoundland, hunting Allied shipping and trying to cut the supply lines connecting North America with Britain. Then, on the morning of September 5, 1942, a German U-ship, U-513, entered Conception Bay and positioned itself near Belle Island, where there were ships sitting offshore waiting. Around midday, the submarine attacked. The first target was the SSS Saginaw, which was located with thousands of tons of Belle Island iron ore. The ship was struck by torpedoes and went down quickly as 29 crew members were killed. Then the SS Lord Strathcona was hit. People on Belle Island could hear the explosions. They could smell the smoke. They watched ships disappear into the water. And then the submarine vanished. That should have been terrifying enough, but it wasn't over. Exactly 2 months later, on November 2nd, another German U-boat entered the bay. And at approximately 3 a.m, the submarine fired. One torpedo missed its intended target and struck the loading pier instead, sending an explosion through the darkness and damaging the facility. Then the submarine turned its attention towards the ships. The SS Rose Castle was struck and sank, taking 28 men with it. Another French vessel was also torpedoed and went down, killing 12 more. In the space of 2 attacks, 4 merchant ships had been sunk, and roughly 70 Allied sailors had lost their lives. In the blink of an eye, Belle Island had become one of the very few places in North America to experience a direct attack by German forces during the Second World War. The aftermath changed the island. Survivors were pulled from the water and brought ashore. Local residents, doctors, and nurses cared for the wounded. The dead were buried on Belle Island. And suddenly, a community that had spent generations looking down into the earth of iron was forced to look outward towards the sea for an enemy. Defenses were strengthened, coastal guns and searchlights watched over the harbor, and anti-torpedo nets were installed around the loading piers. But the most haunting reminder of those attacks is still beneath the water. The 4 ships that went down in 1942 remain on the seafloor around Belle Island.
The captain of the submarine who sank the ships was Captain Ralph Rugeberg. Now, Marita Collins is the daughter of Ralph Rugerberg, who was the captain of the U-513. And when he died, she found all of his memorabilia, his certificates, his ribbons, his medals that had been awarded to him during the wartime that she knew nothing about. So we got these people, and they've got like certificates signed by Adolf Hitler. Marita and Barry came, and we spent the whole day with them. And it was so sad for her because she knew her father's work, but she didn't know her father's work. And when she came, I embraced her, and I am not kidding. She was in fear and trembling. And I said, Marita, she said, no, Teresita, I did not know that my father was responsible for any of this. And she felt that our people would kind of not want to have anything to do with her. So I embraced her, I hugged her, and I said, Marita, look, my grandfather was one of the first 500. Your father came to Conception Bay and did a job he had to do. I'm sure my grandfather did things during his stint that he didn't want to do. And I'm sure that your father had remorse if you didn't even know he had this memorabilia. So I said, my darling, this is history now. Anyway, by the time she left, she had gifted us all of it, and we have it here now in our exhibit space.
When the Second World War finally ended in 1949, you might have expected the Belle Island mines to begin winding down. Instead, the opposite happened. The war had demonstrated just how important iron was to the modern world, and Europe needed to be rebuilt, so the demand for steel surged. The mines entered what would become one of the most prosperous periods in their history. Production remained strong, the operation expanded, and new investments brought modernization underground. With the boom, the population grew, and by 1961, more than 12,000 people lived on Belle Island, and the vast majority of the community depended on the mines. But the world had changed, and new deposits were being developed in places like Labrador, South America, and Australia. Unlike Belle Island, many of these new mines could operate at a much lower cost. The decline came slowly at first. Number 6 mine closed in 1959. Number 4 followed in 1962. Then, on June 30th, 1966, the machinery stopped. After 71 years of continuous mining, nearly 79 million tons of ore had been shipped from Belle Island. The last miners came back to the surface. The lights went out.
So when the mines closed, people had to leave. There was between 12 and 14,000 people on Belle Island at the time, and many of them migrated to Ontario, to Galt actually, which is now Cambridge. They were given by the provincial government $1,500 for their homes, $1,500. Most of the houses on Belle Island were at that time in 1966 mansions. The kicker was they gave up their house for $1,500. Then the government resold the house back to any residents who weren't moving, who wanted to buy it, with the proviso that it had to be torn down.
For decades, that was the end of the story anyone told about Belle Island, until 1998, when Teddy helped open the province's newest museum, and the Belle Island No. 2 mine had its first public underground tour. Then, 2 years later, the above-ground Belle Island Community Museum opened to visitors in the summer of 2000.
So we have come to realize that what we have built is far more than a museum. It's far more than a mine tour. What we have built is an economic engine for the community of Belle Island. We have systematically replaced mining as an industry with destination tourism as an industry.
Today, visitors can walk through the museum surrounded by photographs, artifacts, and stories from the mining era. Then they descend. And that's where the atmosphere changes, because it isn't a reconstruction. These are the original tunnels. The walls were carved by miners. The ore is still embedded in the rock. And somewhere in the darkness, there are physical remnants of a working mine that employed generations of Bell Islanders. The museum preserves the history, but the mine itself preserves something else. Over the years, Bell Island has developed a reputation for ghost stories and supernatural folklore, including tales connected to its mining past. Every photograph upstairs represents someone who once walked these tunnels. Every old mining tool was once held by a living hand. And when you descend beneath the museum, you are stepping into the same darkness those miners knew. The museum tells us who they were. But down there, you can't help wondering whether something has remained.
So I will say that we have had people who've come back upstairs with their cameras. When the cameras weren't a phone, they'd have a good camera like a Canon, and they'd be looking through their pictures on their screen, and they'd see something in the picture. So they'd be taking a picture of their family member, and it would look like a shape or a glow or something behind their family member. We did have some patrons who said, just look at this. I can remember looking at one time. I don't know if you remember way back in the day when the gentlemen would wear the braces and they'd have on the striped shirts, and the white shirts would have a stand-up collar. Way back in the probably 30s and 40s, and they'd wear a handlebar mustache. Well, I remember seeing a picture that a lady took of her family, and behind the family there was a gentleman with, you could see he was tall, he had a handlebar mustache, he had, now you got to remember now, this is very faint, but it's almost like a smoke. Like a mist, like he's in a mist. But you can pick out the shirt, you can pick out the pants, and that shape is right behind his family. That looked like an old fella stood behind him.
Other than the unexplained images in photos, Teddy says there are staff who claim the mine holds unexplained scents.
Our president, Linda Hickey, says that every single time she goes downstairs, she can smell hay. You got to remember now, the horses were kept downstairs. I have some of our tour guides who've said over the years that when they go down, they can smell cigarette smoke. Because you got to remember that the miners were permitted to smoke, and they all smoked back in the day. So that particular tour guide smelled cigarette smoke. I've had people who, I did have a group come who wanted to put some equipment there for a couple of weeks to check the paranormal. They really didn't report back a whole lot.
Investigators haven't been able to confirm whether or not the mine has paranormal activity, but there have been others who can't help feeling something they can't quite explain.
One October, maybe 3 years ago, I was here by myself, and my husband came in to bring me in lunch. And he said, there's a car with two gentlemen outside. And I said, listen, while you're here, why don't you ask them to come in? So they came in, and I, in my office, you can get into the exhibit space. You don't have to go right around the building. So I opened up the office door and led them into the exhibit space. And as I did, the gentleman went, oh my. And I thought he was having a heart attack. I said, oh my heavens, are you okay? He said, don't you feel it? He said, you don't feel it? I said, no. He said, oh my God, there's such a presence here. He said, it almost knocked me back when I walked in. That same fall, another day, when I was here by myself, and my husband happened to be here as well, I have cameras in my office, so another car drove in. It was off season and they couldn't go down in the mine, but they could certainly have a look at the museum. And he was a burly man, this gentleman. And he was in, and I went in to speak to him, and he said, my God, he said, crowd around here today. And I said, beg your pardon? Yeah, he said, you don't feel it, do you? I said, I don't feel what? No, I said, there's a presence here. I can really feel the presence.
Regardless of what she's heard, Teddy remains a skeptic.
I don't want to blow smoke up anybody's skirt, or I don't want to kind of go nah to the people who are saying this, because I haven't seen it. I can only report what I know, and I don't have the propensity to make it up as I go. That's not who I am. So yes, I can't say that people didn't see that, or didn't hear that, or didn't experience that. All I know is what I've said. I have nobody who've come out of the mine and said anything like that. For example, the woman in white. The woman in white on Bell Island was a person that dressed up to frighten the children so they'd go in the summertime and they wouldn't be up all night long. It wasn't a phantom.
However, if you believe the stories from the mine, you might be inclined to believe otherwise. A sound from below, a footstep in an empty corridor, a voice where there shouldn't be one. And when you're standing in a museum built over an abandoned mine, it's hard not to wonder whether you're simply listening to the building, or whether something underneath is still trying to be heard. For Teddy, her only real experience with the mine came from something she saw.
I have cameras all set up outside and inside, and they are connected to my mobile. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, my mobile went off, and I picked it up, and it showed me the porch. When we close in the winter, so our front door, which is a glass door, was shuttered, but the camera showed a light. And so there's nothing in that porch. From January to April, every night at about the same time, my cameras went off. So maybe in March, I was done with it. Anyway, I sat up in bed and I was looking at this porch, and up in the left-hand corner, I saw 2 little circles, 2 tiny circles, and they were like hovering. And I watched them, and I watched them, and I watched them. So the next morning when I got up and I opened my camera, couldn't see a thing.
Whatever it was gone and hasn't returned. As I mentioned earlier, Teddy has lived on the island her whole life. Although she might not be entirely sure that there's something in the mine, she is quite sure that there are other beings on the island.
My mother told stories about fairies on Bell Island, not necessarily in the mine. And she said on a beautiful summer's night, they could sit out on the back step and they could hear music in the woods. And it was the fairies. And she said her and her older sister were going to the store, which is on top of the hill from where she lived, in the evening. And it was just getting dark. And there was a drain next to where they were walking on the road. And she said as they walked, they could hear splat, 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 as if somebody was walking in the drain in the water. But she said they looked and they couldn't see anybody.
that wasn't their only encounter with them.
Auntie Alice was going in to pick up grandfather in the mine, and she had the horse and dray car. And a dray car was basically a long, flat cart on wheels, and that's what they carried the wood on. But she'd go pick up grandfather and my father and her brother. To be 5 or 6 men that would get a ride home to Lance Cove from the mine on the dray car. So she got halfway through the path, and she said the horse started to labor, and it started to sweat, and it was taking its time, and it was only her and the horse, and the dray car was empty. And it was like the horse was carrying a really heavy load of wood. And she got really worried about the horse. And they went so far, and she was going to stop the horse. But before she got a chance to stop the horse picked up its trot. And they kept on going until it got into the mine. So when grandfather came out, and he and my father and her brother, they all got on the dray car, she said, "Dada, I got to tell you what happened to the horse on my way to the mine." I think the horse's name was Rosie. Anyway, she said Rosie got so far and she couldn't get any further. And grandfather said, "Why not?" She said, "I don't know." She said she never stopped, but it's like she was carrying a load of wood, and she was sweating and breathing hard. And grandfather, he said, "Did she get okay after?" And she said, "Oh yes." All of a sudden she picked up the trot. And grandfather said, "That was it." And she said, "It was what?" She said, "The fairies took a ride." The fairies took a ride, he said. And he said, the fairies got up so far and they jumped off, and then Rosie was the best kind.
Standing on Bell Island today, it's difficult to imagine the world that once existed. It was filled with families who earned their keep deep beneath your feet. The mines are silent now. The ships are gone, and so are the men who spent their lives underground. But their presence is still woven into the island. You can find it in the old workings, the museum, the abandoned machinery, and the stories passed down through generations. Maybe the mine holds nothing more than endless darkness. Maybe it's nothing more than echoes of a dangerous past that refuses to disappear. Teddy refuses to confirm if it's one thing or another. Either way, Bell Island leaves you with one unsettling thought. When a place holds that many lives, that much tragedy, and more than a century of history, perhaps it's not so strange to wonder what might be still lingering below. Thank you for joining me as we explored the Bell Island Mine No. 2 Tour and Museum in Bell Island, Newfoundland. And a special thank you to Teddy McCarthy, Executive Director, for taking the time to talk with me. I really do appreciate it. If you want to visit Bell Island Mine Museum, which I highly recommend, I will link their website in the show notes. Do you have a ghost story, paranormal encounter, or true crime? If yes, email it to me so that I can cover it and share with all the listeners on this podcast. You can email me through the website hauntedcanada.com. If this episode gave you the chills in the best possible way, please consider supporting this show by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. Every coffee helps to keep these stories coming, and if you want to go even deeper, stay tuned because I will be adding a Patreon very soon. Haunted Canada is sponsored by the Edmonton Ghost Tours. I will link the website in the show notes. Haunted Canada is written and produced by me, Nadine Bailey, with senior producer Dila Velasquez. Production and sound design is by Rob Johnston, with help from Corey Price. If you'd like to support this podcast, please follow, share, and tell a friend about this podcast. We would also appreciate a like and a 5-star written review. If you're on Spotify, tap follow, that plus button, and it helps more people find these Canadian ghost stories. Also, you can follow me under different social media platforms, including TikTok and my YouTube channel, Haunted Canada. Hey everyone, I've got some exciting news. I'll be hosting a haunted and paranormal tour of Ireland from May 22nd to the 29th of 2027. in partnership with my friend Joanne at Expedia. We're going to be visiting haunted locations, staying in haunted castles, and exploring many historical places, all while delving into ghosts, hauntings, and paranormal activity. So be sure to bring your EMF readers with you. All the information for this tour is now posted on my website, hauntedcanada.com. It has all the information and the itinerary and how you can book. Now remember, space is limited, so book early. Thank you from all of us at Haunted Canada and Curious Cast. Have a good night, everyone, and stay haunted.